Sandhya to introduce our speaker, Sundari. And of course, it's a very, very useful topic. Hope you guys are ready with your questions because we're going to have a Q&A session at the end after Sundari finishes her talk. So please have your questions ready and raise your hand once you want to ask the questions. We'll give preference to the people who raise their hands. If we have more time, we'll go with the questions that are there in the questions tab in the chat window. Okay, Sandhya, if you would just introduce Sundari and then we can get started.
Thank you, Jayant. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We have Sundari R. Pasupati from Tempest Law Associates today with us. So Sundari did her bachelor's in law from Bangalore, but she did her master's from University of Columbia, New York City. She did her master's in banking, corporate finance, security laws, and at Columbia. But before coming back to India, she worked in Chicago for 7 years and gained experience there. So in India, she's been working with Tempest Law Associates, and she has been a revered partner since then. And she has a really good charisma and charm to talk to people. It was a really delight, meeting her every time at T-Hub that she came. And so, yeah, over to you, Sundari. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to our students today. And hope you have a great session. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here.
Good morning. If you could just get the mic a little bit closer to yourself, if possible.
Okay. Is this okay?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be hosting this session and being part of the T-Hub series of sessions that they're hosting. And we'll be very happy to clarify and discuss any issues of concern because these are not the normal times. And in fact, I like their topic, business unusual, because it's usually business usual, but these are unusual times, unprecedented times. Everybody is facing challenges, how this is novel, and doctors are struggling with the virus. I think, the entire economy and the businesses and even legal issues that are cropping up are something that they are unprecedented and people are not prepared to handle these. And so quite a few legal issues are coming up, and that's the purpose of this session, to highlight some of the issues that we are seeing that our clients are facing. I'm sure you are also in the same boat, struggling to see how to navigate through these times. So that's the whole point. And so there are two main topics that I would like to deal today. One is the employee-related issues, in terms of how do we go about, do we retain the workforce? Do we make any changes to the compensation? Because some of the larger companies as well are looking at sabbaticals, to pay cuts, to deferred payments, to, quite a few options they are looking at, though I think nobody is interested in terminating employees, but sometimes the businesses are in such a bad shape, in terms of the revenue being affected, and, I'm sure there are reserves, but we are, I know I'm talking to the startup community, so there are quite a few challenges in terms of making sure the same workforce continues. So how do we deal with this, and how do we kind of renegotiate, or how do we go about communicating this and without actually getting into a legal trouble? One of the main concerns is that, as you are all aware, the government of India and the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued certain circulars. Initially, what they issued in March, end of March, was more advisory given to several chief secretaries to implement in the states. And the government has invoked the Disaster Management Act and the Epidemic Act to pass certain circulars. And what they've done, initially they've given advisory, but on 29th March, they have issued a circular, which it's like a order which says that all industries, shops and establishments should continue to pay their workers the full salaries and, during the lockdown period. So this is a directive that has been given. This has the force of law. So quite a few challenges are coming up because of this order. Clients and companies are not sure if they can do what they have to do because of the factual situation, or should they follow this order. And if they follow the order, sometimes it may run these companies into bankruptcy. They may not be able to sustain or go ahead with the operations the way they used to earlier. So how do we go about this? And is there an excuse not to comply with this order, or should they comply with this order in full? Or is there any kind of a leeway? So these are all the issues that are coming up. In fact, yesterday also I spoke at the forum where all the top industries and all the CEOs of our state are part of that organization, and these are the same issues that have come about. First is to check if this is even constitutionally valid, that the government has compelled private establishments to go about and pay entire salary. In fact, Sandhya and Jayant, sorry to interrupt you for a minute. I have shared with Sandhya a circular. If it is possible, if it can be shared on the screen.
Definitely it's possible. If you have that on your system right now, you can itself share your screen.
How do I do that? Sorry, using the name first time.
At the bottom, there'll be an icon which says share your screen. Yeah.
1 minute. I'll just open this in. Okay. Okay, it's showing another one. Share my.
Yeah, you just click the the big leftmost thing and click screen.
Share your screen. Choose what you would like to.
Just the full screen would work fine.
Okay, 1 minute. I have actually emailed to Sandhya, but 1 minute. Your entire screen. It's not letting me do that, Jayant.
Okay, you just continue. I'll get that up as a share.
Okay. I emailed to Sandhya just a few minutes back.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so this is the ministry order. It was the Government of India, Ministry of Home Affairs, 29th March 2020. I'm sure some of you have seen it. What it says is all the employers, be it in the industry or in the shops and commercial establishments, shall make payment of wages of their workers at their workplaces on the due date without any deduction for the period their establishments are under closure during the lockdown. So this particular provision raises a few concerns, because what this is saying is, it's saying being in the industry or in the shops and commercial establishments, and it is not using the word employees. It is using the word workers. So workers at their workplaces on the due date without any deduction for the period of their establishments are under closure during the lockdown. So because of the usage of the word workers, and it's not saying employees, there is a little bit of ambiguity in terms of whether this is applicable to all employees, or is it applicable to those workers who are covered under the Industrial Disputes Act or the Shops and Commercial Establishments Act, because as you are all aware, labor laws, there are quite a few protections to workmen who come under the ambit of the definition of workmen under the Industrial Disputes Act. So is this referring to those workmen, or is it referring to all the employees who may not be covered under the ID Act also? That is one of the concerns. The second concern is this dealing with only during the period of the lockdown, or is this going to continue, applicability is going to continue even after the lockdown? So what happens? I stay until the end of lockdown, I don't do any drastic measures. Can I terminate or deduct the salaries or send people on sabbatical after the period of lockdown? But even during the period of lockdown, if I'm not in a position to pay, because what we understand from most clients is, even MNCs, whatever, they've all paid for March. So do they pay for April, or do they reduce the workforce? How do they deal with it? That's the concern that's coming up. And you may have also seen in the newspapers that this particular order has been challenged because on the same lines as this central government order, several state governments have also issued similar orders, taking the power under the Disaster Management Act. Whereas the Disaster Management Act has nothing to do with the compliance or payment of salaries. The Disaster Management Act or the Epidemic Act don't even have the words employees or employers anywhere. But there are provisions which say that the states, the central government or the states have the power to implement such measures for ensuring to mitigate the impact or the consequences of the disaster. So COVID being the disaster that they've declared, would this come under the purview of the Disaster Management Act? Is there a legislative competence? And is this violative of Article 19 1G of the Constitution of India, whereby there is a freedom to carry on your business, trade, profession, and activities? Is this coming in the way of a restriction? And that too, this is being imposed on private establishments. This is not in the government. On the one hand, the private establishments are being asked to pay full salaries without any deduction. And the governments, say, you may also have seen that the Telangana government and a few other governments have gone about cutting the pay for government employees. So these are some of the issues that have come about. So the government is adopting a different strategy, whereas it has mandated the private establishments to go about paying the full wages. So how do we deal with this? And therefore, to question and to lay to rest all these issues, writ petitions have been filed. I understand questioning the government of India and the government of Maharashtra's directives. A writ petition has been filed in the Supreme Court. It's called Nagrika Export Limited Petition versus Union of India, where they have questioned and raised some of these issues. What they're saying is this particular order is vague in the way it has been drafted. It is not clear if it is applicable to all the employees or is it applicable to only workers. And this is violative of Article 14 and 19 of the Constitution to carry on the business, and it's also discriminatory because it is not taking into consideration all the factual and financial capabilities of the employers to bear the burden of payment of salary without there being any production. Because the petitioner who has gone to the court is somebody in the textile industry, and there is absolutely no production. In spite of all of that, they're being compelled to comply with this order. And whether it is factually feasible when the establishment is closed for the period of lockdown, and is this even within the power, constitutional validity, and all of that has been questioned. But this writ petition, as we understand, has been filed only April 15. So far, the matter has not come for hearing. I think the Supreme Court is pending before the Supreme Court, but there is no order passed. So some of these issues are still open. However, the legal experts are coming up with their own interpretation of the March 29th order. And the interpretation that is being given, I'm not sure if Jayant has been able to share the screen, but...
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. The screen is actually shared. So the other people are able to see this document.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so I'm going to...
Take it off, you can just let me know. I can take it.
Sure. So I wanted to focus on the highlighted portion, the one in yellow color, where it is talking about a payment only to the... shall make second line, shall make payment of wages of workers. So I wanted to draw the attention and then discuss on who's a workman under the Industrial Disputes Act. And a workman under the... I'm not sure how many of you are familiar. It's quite simple in the sense it includes skilled, unskilled, manual, all of those labor, including all the employees, but it has certain exclusions. The exclusions are very important for our discussion for the reason that the exclusions, people who are in the managerial or administrative capacity, who are employed in mainly managerial or administrative capacity, and who are also in supervisory capacity, and they draw more than 10,000 rupees, they do not, by virtue of these exclusions, fall within the definition of workmen. So that is kind of covering quite a few employees in the IT sector or in these other establishments which are not highly in the skilled, unskilled, manual labor kind of thing, because those industries are different. But I'm focusing more on the IT industry and the other e-commerce and some of the knowledge-based industries where many people are in the managerial or administrative capacity. And if they're drawing most of the wages are much more than 10,000 rupees. So the definition of workman being what it is it possible to take an interpretation that this order is applicable to only those people who fall under the 10,000 rupees category where they are workmen and the wages have to be paid to them in full, whereas people who are in the employment contracts, because there's a classification between labor law protection and workmen, and people who have signed employment contracts and they have certain benefits and all the PF, gratuity, and all the other benefits under the employment contracts. So how do we deal with that set of category of employees? Do they fall within this protection or not? That is one of the issues that is coming up. And the other question that's under the labor laws, under the ID Act and the Shops Act, there are very detailed procedures for layoffs, retrenchment, and the natural calamity that we are facing. This is one of the grounds which come under the layoff definition as well. So if this can be classified as a layoff under the ID Act, then under the Act, the provisions provide that for a period of 45 days, you will be able to pay them only 50% of the wages. And if it proceeds beyond the 45 days, then you can invoke clauses of retrenchment. Retrenchment is where you are terminating them other than as a punishment. And if you were to terminate or invoke the retrenchment clauses, again, there are two points to keep in mind. Retrenchment compensation is provided for where at least a minimum of 1 month notice is to be given, and then 15 days pay for every completed year of service will have to be. However, where the termination is due to the clauses in the employment contract, there is an exclusion that doesn't fall within the retrenchment, and what governs is the employment contract. So if it is a stipulation in the contract, there is a clause which says you can terminate by a notice, by giving a 30 days notice or a 60-day notice, then you may be able to go under the Employment Act, employment contract, instead of under the retrenchment provisions. So there are exclusions wherever there are employment contracts under the ID Act. The other question that also comes up is generally for all the establishments, the Shops and Commercial Establishments Act, Telangana Shops and Commercial Establishment Act, this usually you're all aware that these are the provisions which govern the leaves, holidays list, and then the timings. Some of these are all the provisions which are under the Shops Act, which are applicable to almost all companies, whether it's small or big, or they all come within the commercial establishment definition. So it's very broad and very wide. So even within the Shops Act, there is no definition of a workman. What it deals with is employees. Therefore, when the order issued by the central government, that March 29th order says workmen or workers under the Shops Act, again, there is an ambiguity because there are no workers under the shops and commercial establishments. And the employees definition is very wide. But Shops Act also has a provision which says that if you have an employment contract and if the terms of the employment contract are better than the termination provisions under the Shops Act, then the employment contract will prevail. Therefore, a lot of these employees, employers will be able to take advantage if there are employment contracts to see, say if there is a 30-day notice period or 60-day notice period or a 90-day notice period, that is something more favorable than what is in the Shops Act. Shops Act also requires only 1 month notice and 15 days pay for every year of completed services. So these are the minimum standards set by the Shops Act, whereas several times we have seen that the employment agreements are far better. So you'll be able to take advantage of that. So these are the issues that are coming up, and there is no conclusive answer in terms of whether this is the right way or that is the right way, because these are still open for final adjudication by the courts. Matter is sub judice. And these are all things that hopefully will get set to rest by the court when we hear the judgment. Maybe there is a broader intent that has been, the court may see that it is applicable to all the employees, not just to workers, because as you all know, under Article 21, right to life and right to livelihood, the state has a duty to protect and provide the right to life and right to livelihood to the citizens of India. Also, the state and the government is considered as parens patriae, meaning it is a custodian or it is the guardian for those citizens who are not able to take care of themselves, like the migrant workers and things like that. Therefore, the government has powers, very wide and broad powers, to be able to pass this legislation. Because of the way the laws are enacted, there is absolutely, it could have done as an amendment or a circular under the labor laws, but they chose to do it under the Disaster Management Act, and it may be considered constitutionally valid, and these may be provisions that are that may be upheld. But what the courts have to see is to balance the private interests of the businesses as well, because if this is going to drive people to file for bankruptcy or insolvency, or if it's actually going to be extremely hardship because of the financial difficulties, or there's no revenue, no reserves, and therefore they may not be able to continue the business, if it's going to affect the larger interests of the industry as such, the court will have to weigh these and see to draw a balance and draw a middle ground. So I'll pause for a second because the other topic I'm going to move on is on the rentals. Jayant, should we take any questions now, or shall we do it at the end of the session, the second topic as well?
Normally we do it at the end of the
Hello?
session. Hi, Sundari. Normally we do it at the end of the session.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it. We'll actually take away that screen. So this was the one relating to the first session, the first topic. The other important dilemma most companies are facing today is under the contracts, because they would have signed lease agreements, long-term leases, short-term leases, workspaces, quite a few with heavy payment obligations under the leases. So the question is, will they be able to get away from it? How do they have to continue paying to the landlords, even if they're not in a position to pay these heavy lease amounts? Or will they be able to take benefit of the force majeure clauses in the contracts? It could be customer contracts, it could be service level agreements, some of those are there. But most important area where people are coming back to us with several questions is in the leases, commercial leases. So I wanted to just take a minute and explain how these force majeure clauses work, and then what is the doctrine of frustration, how does that work, so that you understand how these things work. As you're all aware, contract law requires that the fundamental premise of contract law is the principle of pacta santa servanda, meaning that agreements are meant to be kept, and there is a sanctity attached to you signing a contract, and you are bound legally by it. Therefore, if you are not able to continue or perform your obligations under a contract, you are liable for any breaches, or and the matters can go into litigation or arbitration. Either the landlord may be able to invoke any of this and hold you liable to pay the unpaid rents. You are very well aware of it. Yes, there is a difficulty in terms of running the business, and that's the reason you're not able to pay the rent under the leases. Yes, but that is not an excuse to be able to get away from it. You may not be able to do it unless the contract itself provides for such an eventuality. Therefore, in most of the lease contracts and most of the other contracts also, you would have seen something called the force majeure clauses. Force majeure is nothing but, what it means is, it's actually an act of God. Give me a minute, I'll just open a document. And these are situations which are beyond the control of anyone. They would not have predicted at the time of entering into a contract that something like this will come about. And that is the reason why, these force majeure clauses, even if they've been there, sometimes you may see them missing from the contracts. And even if they are there, the standard clauses are put in. We have reviewed several force majeure clauses. We were not able to find the epidemic or the pandemic kind of language. Now people are revising them whenever somebody is drafting. They're putting in these eventualities as well within the force majeure clauses. But what it actually generally covers is an act of God, war, or events beyond the control of the parties. So some of these are what are considered to be force majeure. So it's very important to see how your contract has those clauses and how are they drafted. Does it actually cover this eventuality? And if it doesn't cover, does it all come within the events beyond the control of the party? How is it drafted? It's important to see the language. And if the language is for force majeure clauses are there, you will be able to invoke them. You'll have to send a notice to the landlord, but you have a certain limited protection under that. What I mean is, you'll be able to invoke the force majeure clause and you'll get the protection. What it means is that if there's an impossibility of performance, you're not able to perform your side of the obligation because of certain events which have made it impossible for you to perform the contract. Therefore, you are seeking to rescind, or you are seeking to be excused from the performance of the contract, from the payment of the rent. So usually what happens is this force majeure clauses are applicable during the period of the eventuality. So it is not something that you can say, there is a COVID and I'm not able to run my business. I will continue to stay in the premises, but I'll not pay rent for the rest of the year. The force majeure clause will help you to the extent of the eventuality, to the extent of that circumstance during that time period. You may be excused, but it can also give you a ground for termination. So if you were to leave, say there is a lock-in period, or if usually there are lock-in periods in the leases, and if there is a lock-in period, if you will not be able to breach that, or you will not be able to get out of it. However, because of these intervening circumstances, you may be able to take advantage of that by issuing a notice and then say that I will have to be excused, I may have to vacate these premises, and I'll be compelled to invoke the force majeure clauses. So that depends on how the language is drafted. And so somebody has to examine that and then, advise you. So how do you go about invoking that? And does it give you an excuse beyond the period of the contract? In our opinion, it does not. But if you were to terminate it based on that ground, that will be helpful. This may be an excuse that you can use. But where there are leases or the contracts where there is no force majeure clause, even there you may be able to invoke Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act, which says that if for an impossibility of performance, a contract becomes void. That means at the time you entered into the contract, you didn't foresee that this circumstance can come about. But because of the circumstance that happened after subsequent to the entering into the contract, and this is it has become impossible to perform your part of the contract. Therefore, you can invoke the doctrine of frustration under Section 56 of the Indian Contract Act and seek a protection, legal protection, and then you may be able to declare the contract as void. And what that means is you can terminate the contract on those grounds. So these are what most of the clients are facing, and they're coming back to us to seek advice. But it's important to see what kind of clauses you have, what kind of, even within your customers' service level agreements, if there are delays, there may be other issues, challenges you're facing working from home, or in terms of the bandwidth, network, all of that. I'm sure people are in a position to understand, but there are back-to-back obligations several times, and some of these contracts that you sign will have very stringent service level agreements as well. If that is something you're facing, it is important to look at some of these contractual clauses to see if there is any benefit you can derive and save yourself within these, in these difficult times. So I'll pause here for a minute, Jayant, and I'll see if there are any questions. And I'm sure we can come back to these topics and then address more.
Sure. We have one question from Sandeep from Actlogica. So Sandeep, I'm going to hand you access. You can ask your question. Okay, Sandeep.
Hey, hi. So thanks for this session. This is on the earlier topic that you mentioned. If that is okay, if I ask that question,
Absolutely.
right? Basically, representation or the contract, employee contract, we need to see which one to be applied, right? Now, for whatever reasons, the employee contracts that we have given while the resources being onboarded, right? It was just a note of, welcome on board, and this is your pay structure and everything. Whereas we have not included any of these clauses or pointers saying the notice period, some of the trivial things that got missed out. Now we are at a very tricky phase where we need to take a difficult decisions. Now, how do we execute them? Because the labor laws has a, do they restrict us from taking these stands? Is 1 month is mandatory notice? Can you throw some light on that if that is okay? That is one question. The second question is also the maternity kind of acts, right? What if we have a resource who is wanting to avail, and unfortunately those resources also come under the purview of if I call it as a layoff list, right? How do we manage that? Can you also give some insights on this topic as well?
Like you said, the typical employment contracts that are generally drafted would not have factored or would not have any provisions which will actually cover this situation. Because even if it is a well-drafted employment agreement, in your case, you said it's a simple and one-pager kind of an appointment letter, or simple one, which doesn't have all these protections. Even in the well-drafted one, nobody would have factored in for, say, reduced pay or pay cuts or sabbatical, or because these are not situations that anybody has faced so far, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but usually there are clauses which would there are two types of termination clauses. One is without any reason. It's called termination for convenience. So you give a notice. He can leave with a notice, or the company can give notice of 1 month, and then can terminate the employee. This clause is generally there. It's a standard clause. Maybe you may have that. The other one is usually for performance reasons or breaches, right? If there is a breach or a misconduct or some kind of negligence, some of those are the grounds for breach-related termination. But where it is not related to a breach, that is where that is the notice. A termination by notice is something you can look at and then take advantage of. And if it is a 30 days notice, you have to comply with it. If it's a 60-day notice, you have to comply with it. You pay salary and leave thereof, and then do that. But if you were not able to do that, or not the notice period, but if you have to immediately say reduce the pay, or you have to defer the pay, people are also looking at deferment. But that depends. Deferment means that you are still taking on the commitment that within 3 months or 6 months that you relook at the position and pay. That's the meaning of deferment. But if you're looking for outright cutting the pay to 50% or 70%, whatever that is that you're looking at, what we are advising our clients is to get the buy-in of the clients, buy-in of the employees. Because, if you're able to get the consent from the employees, because I'm sure everybody understands the current situation, because you're not doing anything intentional to lay off people. It is because of the larger macro issues that, because of the economy and because of your customers, everything else, that it may be better off that they are on a 50% pay rather than not having a job. Yes, so they may be able to consent. So what we are advising is to get the buy-in, have a if you're doing it a large scale for several of your employees, then I would say you should draft some kind of a scheme or something that is uniformly applicable, so that it's not, or you could do graded, within this salary limit, this is what we will cut. Below this salary limit, this is what we'll cut. So you can come up with your own staggered and different range in terms of how you want to go about. And if it's uniformly, the bottom line is to make it uniform so it doesn't seem like a discrimination within the employees of a certain cadre. So if you're able to at least make some kind of a demarcation there, and then identify and inform the employees. Most of the people, what the MNCs are also doing is get the consent of the employees, explain to them that this is the situation, this is what it is, and you are compelled to do that. Then get a proper consent letter or something like that. We can draft, or we've drafted for other clients. There you are able to get the signature of the employee, and then it's a better defense, even if he goes to a labor commissioner or the court, to say that this was discussed and agreed, and then this was the consent. So you have a better defense to do that. Long answer, but I hope answered your query.
This certainly helps, Sundari. Just the add-on question that I've asked on the maternity resources who wants to avail maternity leave, if there also are the candidates that we unfortunately wants to put in that bucket of resources whom we are considering for wanting to take a hard decisions with some of these resources, how do we go about there?
Definitely, it's a more sensitive issue, and even without these COVID situations, maternity is something you need to deal with on a sensitive and a more careful basis, because that can be treated as a discrimination. People can go, file and ask for the maternity benefits and everything else. And now that it's a much longer time period, 6 months, in fact, many companies are finding it more burdensome also to get into the maternity payments. But that being said, I'm sure she's also an employee, and it cannot be an exception. But if you would like to consider maybe a slightly higher amount as a lump sum payment for her, you may consider that. But that is, if you have to go strictly under the law, then you have to pay all the 6 months. But if you're not in a position to pay, then you take a call, what is more beneficial, and then inform the employee, and then agree to a lump sum there that is taken care of to some extent. That's all I can say.
Sure, Sundari. Thanks for that.
Yep. Any other questions, Jayant? Do you see?
Yeah, we have some more. Before we actually move on to the next question, I just want to take a minute, Sundari. So guys, before we move on, I want everyone actually to just go to the chat window, because I'm just pasting the feedback form over there for this whole session. So I really encourage you guys to go and fill that. We'll just take a 30-second to 1 minute break, so you guys get a chance to go look over it and fill it up. So we, in another minute, we'll take the next question again. Sundari, we have a couple more questions in line already.
Yes.
The next question is going to be from Charan Singh. He's the CEO of Talent Tracker. So I'm just going to give him the access.
Hi, Sundari. Hope you're able to hear me?
Yes, Charan, I can hear you. Sundari, are you able to hear?
Yes.
Thank you so very much for this session, and it is answering lots of our questions and concerns which is happening due to this COVID-19 situation, right? So I run a software company, and it's a small organization, and we are also facing the challenges coming in from this situation, wherein we are also unable to process salaries on time, or able to have salary cuts for employees. Also, our customers are not paying on time. They are giving us excuses that we are not we don't have enough cash to pay you on time and all. So my question is, in terms, first of all, one of my question is already addressed in your previous discussion, in previous questions, and the major concern I have about the office space which we were using. And from March onwards, we are not even going to offices as a precautionary basis. I told my employees not to work from office, and we were working from home. But now these office guys are like behind us to pay rents, the entire rent. So are we eligible to pay them the 100% rent, because we are not using the premises? There is no electricity, there is no other services, cleaning services and all. And any complications in terms of legality or if we are not paying them on or anything. I would like to understand, can we do some cut downs on our payments for the office premises which we are using currently? I'm calling from Bangalore and I have offices in Bangalore as well as Pune.
Yes, Sharon. So in terms of that's exactly the issue. You should look at the lease that you have signed with your landlord for those office space. Look at the lease and see if there are any clauses relating to force majeure. And if there is a clause relating to force majeure, you may be able to take help or an excuse under that, because this is an event which is beyond your control. You're not using the premises in the first place, and you're not obviously, because of the lockdown, nobody is going, nobody is there, but you are continuing in the in the space. Legally you're still a tenant, you're not vacated, and you are compelled to pay that. So the landlord is right in asking for it, because there is no immediate excuse in terms of not paying the rent unless you are able to inform him. You have to look at the lease first, see if you have a force majeure, and if you do, then you may ask him. You can send him a letter saying that for this period of the lockdown, I will not be able to pay the rent because of my financial situation. The clients have not been able to pay, and we have heavy costs in terms of this. But I wouldn't say that is a complete defense. To some extent, yes, it does help, but the landlord can come back and contest it. But you have the protection is only during this period of the lockdown. So if you have to take a call whether you will be continuing the premises or you're looking to vacate the premises, because that's a call you need to take. If you were to vacate, then you need to give a notice to him. And if you are planning to continue, then for this time period, you can ask for a reduction in the rent or a deferment in the rent that you may pay him after the market picks up, and continue in those premises. So that's a call you need to take. And there is another angle to this. Some of our other clients have come back and said most of these landlords also have this security deposit, right? So technically speaking, the security deposit is not meant for collecting the amounts which are unpaid rents. It's usually meant for any kind of damages or any kind of if there is any kind of repair or anything on the premises, that when you vacate, that is the only thing that the landlord can adjust from the security deposit. But it is possible that they may, because the money is with them, it is possible that they may adjust from the security deposit your unpaid rents also. So that's something, you have to make it very clear in your email and the notice that you issue, saying that do not adjust from the security deposit, or you need to renegotiate some of these terms. So that's the best that you can do in this situation.
That's answered my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Charan. Now we have Rakesh, who's coming in from Aradhya Harvest. Hey, Rakesh.
Yeah, my voice is audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Jayant and Sundari madam. So it's actually we are basically mainly into the agriculture area, though we are running very minus, and that's okay. And the point here is how the relation between the idea and investor, like in what basis will what is the basic things we innovative people should follow while catching the investment and good. That is one thing I want to know. It's a basic question. Maybe I'm not sure. Hello, you got my question?
Hey, Sundari, we can't hear you right now. And someone's phone is ringing.
Someone's phone is ringing.
Madam, my question is clear or like?
Can you just repeat it, Rakesh?
Yeah, what kind of investors we should follow, and how the relation between innovator and investor, how the basic things, basic logics legally should follow. That is what.
Okay.
Sundari, you're breaking up a little. Rajesh, can you just mute your mic, please?
Yeah, please, 1 second. Please, can you please mute me?
Yeah. Hi. So sorry about that, guys. Sundari, can you just continue?
Yeah.
breaking up a little bit actually, Sundari.
Let me move to another place. 1 minute. Yeah, is this any better?
Yeah, it's a bit better now.
Yeah. So Rakesh, in terms of your question, how do you take the investors? How do you connect with investors? Okay, but that being said, you should definitely, what the investors look for is your innovative product, your IP, intellectual property, but at the same time, they may look for what is the market potential for your product, and are you, how is the potential for making the revenue and commercialization, and based on that, the valuation is determined, and the investors will look for, a certain percentage in your company or whatever. That you have to negotiate and see what is the amount you want to raise. So that's how you connect. But some of the basic things should be in place in terms of your team, in terms of your IP, in terms of your market, customers. Some of those things you have to take in, put everything in place before you talk to investors.
Okay, we have another question from the founder of IP Apps Technology.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. This is Amitabh Datta here. I'm from Hyderabad, and my question is related with two things, which we are actually facing as a young startup. Like ours is it's a 1-year-old startup, and our office is also a rental place, and the systems what we are using from the vendor, that is also in a rental. Now the situation is like from last 1.5 months, we are unable to operate from office. So in that case, what is happening that the rent which we supposed to give to our owner, that we need to pay because of the situation. And another thing is like the all the systems like what we are using in our office, and some of the accessories and operation equipments which we are also having rents, which is actually not being used from last 1.5 months. So my question is like how we can deal with these vendors and our landlord, so that we can have some option to make them understood that what is the situation is going on, and we can get some relief.
Your vendors and people you have already.
Sundari, can you again? It's a little far off your voice.
For vendors and people you already use the services, you can't not pay. You can't completely, avoid payment. So you may want to renegotiate with them in terms of how you want to pay. Maybe you'll pay them in installments, or you'll make a deferred payment. You'll take a longer time to make the payment. You make a small payment now and subsequently do that. So that you can renegotiate with them. Same with the landlord, right? I mean, these are, like I said, in the leases, if you are not able to pay for this time period, you can send them an email or a letter invoking a force measure. But at the same time, you have to take a call whether you're going to continue in that premises or you want to terminate the lease. So that depending on that, you have to inform or renegotiate. It can only excuse you for a certain time period, at least in the leases, if you have force majeure. But in vendor contracts, already you have taken the services, you have to pay them. You may not be able to pay them fully, but you have to talk to them and get consent to pay them in, and people will appreciate, even if you're paying them in over a period of 3 months or 6 months, at least if there is a payment being made, that they may appreciate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But the thing is just like I got one point in this conversation. Like coincidentally, we are also having a similar situation. Like the present office where we are located right now, we was actually thinking of leaving that place a couple of months back. And now when this situation happened, everything was locked down. So we didn't get any chance to take the call on that action. So now we are in a situation that might not this lockdown might not happen. So we may leave that place till day. But because of this lockdown and we are unable to go to the office and do any operation thing, we couldn't do that. So now the thing is this, like as you are saying, that something like if we are planning of leaving that place or something like that, what is the precaution? Like what are the options for that?
Looking at leaving the place, you still have to pay until the date you are not vacated, right? If you're still in occupation of the premises, you have to pay. So
Yeah.
you have to look at your contract. I'm sure you would have signed a lease or a sublease, whatever you would have signed. If there is a force measure, because force measure is something that can help you, like an act of God, an emergency, epidemic, terrorist strike, government action. Some of these are events beyond the control of parties. That's where there is a legal protection for you, that you may invoke that force and say these are things beyond my control, therefore I'm not in a position to pay. You can do that, and for this time period you can ask for an excuse. The landlord may not agree. Even if we take the defense, the landlord may not agree. He may send a legal notice for you to pay. He may go to the court or to the arbitration. So those are things that you have to be prepared for. But from your side, you can at least invoke the legal protection and send that, depending on what your contract says.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Any more questions, everybody? I think in the chat window, we have one from Anurag, the director of Clowork. So he's typed in the questions tab. I'm just going to read it out, Sundari.
Sure.
We invoke act of frustration to waive off rental obligation for office space for the lockdown period. Oh, I think this must be answered already, but in case you just want to point something.
Okay.
Hello. We can't hear you. So the question is from Anurag. Can we invoke act of frustration to waive off rental obligation for office space for the lockdown period?
Yes. You can.
We can't hear you clearly, Sundari.
Yeah, Jayant.
Yeah, now it's good.
Yeah. So, like I said, yes, they can invoke the doctrine of frustration if there is no force measure. If there is a force measure clause, you can invoke the force measure clause from the contract. If it is absent, you can still invoke Section 56 of the Contract Act and doctrine of frustration and seek non-payment for the period of the lockdown. Yes, that can be done.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Anurag. If there are no more questions, come on, guys. We have scheduled time for some more questions. So please raise your hands. You won't get such an opportunity again to get your questions answered in this manner. So.
One more thing is, because work, my email is available. If still somebody wants to send me an email or whatever, we'll be happy to clarify. That's also not a problem.
Sure.
These are, yeah. But considering sabbatical or deferred payment, or sometimes there are even larger companies are looking at golden handshake, where they are providing a voluntary retirement for some of the senior employees. And then they're also looking at pay cuts. So these are what the industry is evaluating, and some of them have implemented also. But again, it is important to have a discussion because no labor law provision is there, or no other legal provision is there where you can, do any of these because of these situations, because these are unprecedented. But if you have the consent of the employees, and we also advised our clients to wait a little bit, if you can, that of course depends on whether they're able to sustain until then, until the period of the lockdown is lifted, so that there is no, it to be just on the safer side, on the side of caution. If that, if they can wait until the lockdown is lifted, that is good. Otherwise, if you can't, in any case, do that, you have to, discuss and get the consent of the employees, so that at least you can have a proper release and, settlement agreement, or, renegotiated terms agreed upon by the employees, so that at least you can, to some extent, prevent any kind of litigation or notices from the PF. Also, to just bring to your notice, the PF officers, EPFO has issued a circular which permits employees to withdraw up to 75% of their balance, what is accumulated in their account on account of COVID. They have permitted, there is a circular issued. So even employees may be able to tap into the PF balance and then utilize that in case of an emergency. But the employers, if they start paying, lesser PF, or the number of employees is reduced, the authorities may get to know that, and there may be a scrutiny. You may get a notice if you do something like this. But if you get a notice, then we'll have to see how to deal with it and give a proper legal defense, factual and legal defense, in terms of how the financial situation is affected. So it's important to keep track of all your financial information, and then the losses that you're suffering, or what you may have not received from the customers. So it's important to keep all the facts ready. So in case there is a notice from any authorities, you'll be able to defend yourself because of any employee layoffs or the pay cuts.
Great. So it looks like most of the questions have been answered, Sundari.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like we have any more coming through.
Yeah. And like I said, if there is anything, you can always clarify on the email. Okay, so Sandhya or you can share, depending on who is interested. They can contact you, and you can forward the emails to me. Not a problem.
Yes, we'll definitely do that. So thanks everyone for joining. I think it's a very helpful session, and obviously, as you guys know, we have weekly webinars to help you deal with this crisis. Of course, today is about legal issues, and other days we have other topics that are being covered. So please ensure that you join and check out the T-Hub events page for more webinars like this from us and even our partners. Thanks a lot, Sundari, for taking this session. I think it's very helpful, and a lot of the startups are giving us good feedback. So in case there are any more questions that we get later on, we'll definitely pass them on to you.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. We're ending the session now. Round of applause for Sundari, please.
Thank you.
And of course, stay safe and on the right side of the law, of course. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.